Welcome to another episode of Media Industries, the talk show that brings the classroom to the industry and the industry to you. I'm Nicholas Boston. I'm a professor in the Department of Journalism and Media Studies at Lehman College of the City University of New York. Media Studies is one of the courses I teach. Students in the class who are learning about the corporate structures and business strategies in the media industries produce this talk show. They invite professionals from across the media industries of print, broadcast, and digital, as well as industries that intersect with media, such as fashion and music, to come on and discuss their jobs and the states of their industries. Students take this opportunity to apply the theoretical knowledge they're gaining in the classroom. This is our third season of Media Industries, the talk show. We have a lineup of 6 episodes, each bringing you an eye-opening conversation with a different professional who makes the media that capture our world. Media Industries is recorded in our state-of-the-art studio in the Multimedia Center at Lehman College and delivered to you here on BronxNet Television. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of Media Industries.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Media Industries, the talk show. This is a place where Lehman students get to apply our scholarly studies from the classroom to live discussion with real-life practitioners and experts in the field.
As your hosts, we will both lead today's discussion on television and studio production. My name is Genesis Lara.
And my name is Madison Ramirez.
And we'd like to welcome our guest, George Rivera, founder and CEO of Digital Laundry, a state-of-the-art digital archiving and production service. He is also the executive producer of eHarlemTV. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're working on or what you have worked on? Just to give us a little bit.
Sure. Beginning at the beginning, I guess I started in the business in a similar place where you guys were as a student. And I was fortunate enough to be part of a consultant group that was doing crisis intervention work in Boston during a time of forced busing. So I started doing development work for television programs at WGBH in Boston. I was going to school in Cambridge. And when I finished school, I thought I was going to do a PhD program in sociology, but I was offered a position at GBH as a researcher, and I decided to take the job.
Yeah.
I was a little tired of going to school, so that's how I started in the business. Today I run independent production studio that is located here in New York City called Digital Laundry, and we operate a brick and mortar facility. So we operate a studio not too differently from this one, with edit facilities and voiceover booths and all of that jazz. And then we offer creative services. So our production company does commercials, documentaries, all kinds of work for broadcast and for corporate purposes.
Oh, wow.
Would you ever say you left the field of sociology, or do you feel like it still plays a role in media industries?
I think you never leave it, because when I talk to people about what I do and why I enjoy doing it, part of the reason is because I call it continuing adult education. In order to tell a story, you need to know it. So every documentary we do, every major project that we do becomes like a thesis project. You can't tell a story that you don't know. So you need to know all there is to know about that. You need to know all there is to know about the people involved in that project if you're going to interview them, if you're going to write script, if you're going to tell a story. You need to know it inside and out. You need to know all the nuances of it. Yeah. So that sociology training really comes to bear on developing narrative, whether it's fiction or whether it's documentary. It really is all storytelling.
So in our class, we were learning about the individual and what they bring to the table. So would sociology be like your characteristic that sets you apart, like your background in it, from other people you work with, or what would you say sets you apart? What do you bring to the table?
I think there are a lot of very smart people in this business, and they bring different skill sets, but what we all bring is perspective. I grew up in New York City, I grew up in Harlem, I grew up on 125th Street, and I've been fortunate enough to progress through the business and work in major media organizations, from public television through commercial television into network news organizations, etc. And I think there's a duality, a flexibility that people that grew up in environments like the one that I grew up in
Like
bring
New York.
to their work. I think diversity, not so much in a traditional sense, but diversity of thought process. If you want to solve a problem, I think you get much further along with 6 people from different backgrounds than you do if you put 6 people who all look the same, who all went to the same schools, who all grew up in the same.
Perspective.
It brings perspective to problem solving. And I tell people our business is all about problem solving. That's what we do every day, is solve new problems. So I think what I bring is, we used to say when we were young students and kids, is that we could cross boundaries. We grew up in Harlem, but we knew how to behave in an Ivy League setting. We knew how to behave downtown. So I'm not sure that all of my colleagues have that flexibility. So when you start to travel the world and you meet people that are different from you, whether they are Syrians or Africans or Asians, having the ability to meet and connect with new people in an honest way, ask them honest questions, empathize with their situations, I think those are very valuable skills. And often people who come from varied backgrounds, who've had to move through different cultural environments, develop those skills, whether you're bilingual or whether you've just grown up in different sort of universes, if you know what I mean, socially. You learn to cross boundaries. And that's an advantage over people. It's a little bit like having street smarts.
Yeah.
Street smarts will serve you very, very well in a war situation.
So being in New York gives us an advantage.
It does. It really does, because you learn to interact. I think you're forced to interact with a lot of different people. And that forces you to develop certain survival and communication skills. And appreciate other people's perspectives. And that's critical to storytelling, because you need to understand and be able to develop the conflict in a story.
So how your office space, or where does your team work? How do you have a lax office, or do you have a very formal setting and everybody just has to brainstorm, or do you have a creative room or a playroom to get the juices flowing?
We now work in a fairly mature freelance environment, so each project is a little bit different. Sometimes, and different stages of projects require different workflows. So there are times when we're developing an idea where everybody will sit together and we'll whiteboard something and come up with a bunch of ideas. And then there are times when we're doing research, so we all go our separate ways with assignments. And then there are times when we're writing and developing script. So those tasks get divided up. And then once we move into a production phase, then there are people charged with shooting and you know, compiling information. And then by the time we get to a post-production phase, it becomes a very narrow focus in an edit room. So the only people in that edit room are an editor and a producer, and you know, somebody like me popping their heads in on occasion.
So the content has to be like flexible because you have different audiences, but how's the process? You said it's also flexible just in the workspace. So how does that, what does that mean for creativity?
Well, the content is driven, we run a business. We run a for-profit business, so all content for us is driven by clients. We develop content sometimes independently on our own, but it's always with a broadcast client or a distributor in mind. So if we're doing a client project, then we're trying to meet the goals of that particular client. So we'll have a series of meetings with that client in advance, try to figure out what they're trying to say, who they're trying to say it to, and figure out the best way to say it. And then once we have agreement on that, we march forward. If we're working with a broadcast distribution outlet, usually that's actually easier because it's pretty clear. They've hired us to do what we do. They know what we do. And they've asked us to do X, Y, or Z. So at that point, it's really just about meeting deadlines.
Yeah. So working with the client really limits your creativity, right? How do you deal with that? How do you handle that?
Well, I don't look at it as limiting our creativity. I look at it as challenging our creativity. So a client has specific goals. They're paying the bills. The client is always right. So you want to get done what they want to get done. If they want to sell a product or if they want to sell their services, normally they're trying to sell something, even if it's an idea. So it's our job to help them do that. And to the extent that we help them do that, we get repeat business. We're not in the business of telling people what their business is. We're in the business of helping clients tell an audience that they're trying to reach what it is that they have to offer in the most attractive way to induce them to come through the door. We do a lot of healthcare work. So oftentimes a healthcare provider may have a new set of services that they want to make the public aware of, and they want to drive people through the door. Healthcare is a very competitive industry today. So just like car dealerships are competing one against the other, healthcare providers are competing one against the other. So they're trying to find the best way to ultimately drive people through their door as opposed to somebody else's door. So our job is to get that done.
Yeah. You just mentioned competition. What's your field like as a producer? Like, do you feel like your job is very stable, or are you always on your toes about maybe being fired? You were talking to us earlier about deadlines and how important they are, and you know, if you don't show up on time, then you're off the script. Or can you tell us more about that?
The business has always been very competitive from the time I entered it to today. It's just changed in the way that it's competitive. I think when I came into the business, there were 3 networks and public television. There wasn't a cable industry.
We learned about
there wasn't a satellite industry. There wasn't 24-hour news. I saw 24-hour news developed and helped launch some of that, but these are new permeations of what once was. So there was a time when you worked in the business, you worked for one of the big companies, for ABC, CBS, or one of the PBS stations. Today, I joke with some of my friends, everybody with a laptop is a filmmaker. And you know, that's kind of good and bad. Part of the problem is that there are a lot of people who haven't necessarily had a great deal of training, but they have access to technology that allows them to shoot pictures and edit, and that's great. Except that in certain circumstances, you need some critical thinking and training to go along with all of that technology. So as the technology bar gets lower, it means that more people can enter the industry, but it doesn't mean that the quality of product necessarily goes up. So from a competitive point of view, we like to think that what sets us apart from others that we compete with is where we stand in terms of the quality of production that we produce. And that's what clients pay for at the end of the day.
So would you say that a consequence of digitalization and maybe like the economy stressors is this lack of quality in content?
I don't like to describe it as a lack of quality because, you know, there are people who like shaky video and grainy video, and there's an audience for that. There's an audience for mobile devices and short streamed stories, and there are niche audiences for a lot of different types of approaches. So it's not fair to knock people that are reaching those audiences, because people enjoy it. I mean, people, their audiences for games, their audiences for all kinds of streaming media. But that's very different than the audience for feature films and big budget drama. So the business has grown this way, and it's grown this way in terms of, but one person's high tech, high end drama is another person's boring. I don't want to watch that. I want to watch my YouTube videos,
This is also
and there's nothing wrong with
a
that.
possibility to broaden perspective, as you were talking about earlier.
That's true.
So.
Yep, there are a lot of different people with a lot of different perspectives that have found voice, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, and you were talking about technology. How do you adapt to technology? It's always changing. How do you keep up with that?
It's a constant struggle. It's a constant learning. It's part of this is extended learning. I spend a lot of time staying on top of new technology for the business, especially in our sphere, new acquisition systems, new post-production systems, all of that, equipment, distribution systems, all of that is important, but it's not the principal part of what we do.
Right.
They're tools. So the tools change, but the fundamentals of storytelling don't. And I think sometimes people, there's a temptation to get seduced by the technology because it's sexy and it changes all the time. So, I'm going to shoot 4K, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to shoot HDR. Well, but what is what are you saying?
Yeah.
And so sometimes there's an overemphasis on the technology, I think, to the detriment of storytelling. And I think people are much better served by focusing on the story, which includes thinking these things through carefully, and then figuring out how to creatively tell it.
Okay, so going back to just how you said the workflow is in the workspace, can you tell us about how maybe their personal lives are affected? Like, we learned that it's very rapid and changing environment, and so how can you personally affect it? Like, does it go into your personal time, some of your work, anything like that?
I eat, sleep, and breathe what I do for a living, pretty much.
Yeah.
Wow.
The people around me do too, but it is not. It's different. There are different paces to different parts of the system. When I did news, and I did news that had hard deadlines, air times, whether it was 6 o'clock local news or 6:30 network news or the 11:30 Nightline, which I worked on. Those are very high pressure situations because you have very hard deadlines. There are no excuses for not making those deadlines. The difference is that you have tremendous resources also at your disposal. You have a lot of smart people, talented crew, talented staff, researchers, other producers helping you, executive producers, writers, people that can help make something happen fast when it has to happen fast.
It's never like a 9 to 5 or...
It's not a 9 to 5, But other parts of the industry are different. Doing documentaries is very different from doing news. It has its own schedule. But everything has a schedule because everything has a budget. And those budgets dictate how much time you get to spend on something. You don't have the luxury of sitting around and thinking about this for 6 weeks.
That actually takes me to a question that I had prepared for you. So we learned about strategy, and it's very important in our class. It's defined as the tactical maneuvers that companies undertake in order to remain relevant and profitable. So in a previous interview, I quoted that you said, it's not enough to put creative energy to start a project, we need to finish them. We need them to be profitable, and we must share strategies to move forward and work together. So what are some strategies you share with your team and your organization of Digital Laundry?
What I think I was talking about in that quote is that I often meet very well-meaning people who tell me, oh, I've got this project, I've been working on it for X number of years. And I oftentimes politely tell them, if you've been working on this that long, you need to move on. Every project is different, certainly, and there are projects that take years to develop. I know that, I've been involved in some of those. But every project also has to have a clock and has to get finished. My goal is to finish whatever it is that we're working on. It's very easy to start a project. It's kind of like doing construction work. Everybody starts painting their room. Finishing it is the hard part,
Yeah.
getting it right. And my goal is to finish, because quite honestly, we don't get paid till we finish. So we finish a project so that we can start the next one, so that we can finish that one, so that we can start the next one.
Process.
Right. So you don't have the luxury of sitting around not finishing things that you start.
Personally, when I heard that quote, I really felt like it resounded with students and just finishing what we're doing right now in school. So we have to finish that, move on to the next project, which is
Right.
what are we doing for our career?
Right.
And if we're going to get into the field of media industries, then it's like, what projects are we going to get into to finish and to progress?
Right.
So
Yeah, I agree. I talk to students often, and people ask me about majors and this and that and the other. And I tell people, you know what employers and I'm concerned with when I meet somebody who wants to work, can you finish what you've started?
Right.
Can you, get here on time? Can you take direction? Can you complete a task in the allotted amount of time? If you can't do that, then you need to figure out a way to get it done. Ask for help.
So in this process of completing projects, what would you say is the main constraints? And I'm talking about, like, I learned your descent is from Puerto Rico and Mexican background.
Right.
So how does that play a part, and what does that mean for other minorities and the content created and the clients that you deal with?
I'm not sure. I know it takes discipline to finish things. I know that.
Yeah.
It's very easy to come up with another idea, to procrastinate. I have a good friend of mine that was an executive producer on a show that I worked on as a producer. And he used to tell me, George, you're going to have pain now or pain later. When are we going to get the script out? When are we going to get an outline? When are we going to get a rough cut? So you can delay
Yeah.
getting a script done, but it doesn't help the process any. In fact, getting a script done early so that 6 other people can look at it and give you
Yeah.
feedback is what you want. You want to get a rough cut done early so that you can sit back and look at it. So the greatest enemy of a project is time. So we can control our work and delivery to a certain extent. So delaying that process doesn't help you get to the finish line. What helps you get to the finish line with a quality product is getting ahead, getting a rough cut done and sharing it.
Right. So what's your best advice that we can take with us into, like, you think, the broader industry of media? So any field, what do you think you can give us advice on?
Find a situation where you can do, and by that I mean it's wonderful to observe, it's wonderful to study and to research, but I tell people, if you want to learn how to do something, do it, and find a situation where you can make mistakes and where somebody will teach you. Nobody's born a director, nobody's born a producer. Somebody gives you a chance to learn and grow in the business if you're lucky. And if you're smart, you pay attention, you work hard, people value that.
Yeah.
So that's a valuable team member. So even if you're just learning, somebody who wants to learn and who shows a capacity to learn and learn from a mistake, because everybody makes one, that's a valuable person.
So you think we don't need experience per se in the field that we want to pursue? You think we just need to have an open mind in learning the new subject that we're introduced to, right?
Well, what I'm saying is get experience.
Right.
Find a way to get to doing. If you want to be in television, find a way to get behind a camera. Find a way to get into a room and write script. Find a way to get into an edit room and learn how that process works.
In finding these ways, is there any like structural constraints that really limit, especially for like the lack of Hispanics in the field? What would you say for that?
There are always constraints and there are always barriers, and they change every day, and your job is to figure out a way to get past them. You have to ask. You have to push. You have to create opportunities.
Okay. So do you think we need an internship to get there, or do you think we need to reach out to people like you, producers, directors? Do you think they would get back to us? How should we go about it?
I would do all of the above. When you're trying to get a foot in the door, you knock on every door that you can find. You know?
And that's the best way to go about it, right?
What's the only way to go about it that I know of? I mean, there's no big sign that says everybody who wants to be in the business, please walk this way.
Yeah.
There are 100 different paths in, and some people are very fortunate. They have an uncle or a cousin or somebody who makes a call for them, and boom, they're in the door. If you don't have that, then you need to find a way in the door. You need to call somebody and ask them for help.
Basically make your way into it.
You have to.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people who are willing to help you if you only ask them for help. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 phone calls. Nothing galls me more than somebody working on a project. Well, I called and left a message.
Yeah.
No, you need to. That person is busy. Their life doesn't depend on your question. Your question, getting an answer to your question is important to you. It may not be important to that person. So you need to call them again.
Yeah.
Go see them.
So being very persistent is very important, especially in an industry that it sounds just so unpredictable that you never know when you're going to get that open door.
That's right. Absolutely right. And you got to be prepared when somebody gives you an opportunity to perform. So that means preparing yourself as best you can.
And you were also saying about how we need to adapt to the very fast-paced industry. So can you tell us more about how we have to, how we want to change as fast as everything else around us is changing?
Well, I mean,
Stay relevant.
Yes.
yeah, I read all the industry journals. I mean, I go to conferences. I talk to other people in the business. It depends on where you are in the business as to how much of a priority technology is to you. But if you're a doctor, you need to keep up with current practices. If you're going to be a successful attorney, you need to understand how the laws are changing and shifting. If this is your business, if media is your business, then you need to be aware of how it's changing.
Yeah, and remain media literate, of course,
Right.
and understand those messages and industry trends and all that stuff.
That's right. That's right.
Well, right now we have to wrap it up. So thank you so much for coming on our show. Can you
It's my
give us
pleasure.
your information, your social media platforms that we can reach you on?
Sure. Digital Laundry is actually easy to find, and that's how you find all the stuff about us, and it's just digitallaundry.net.
Thank you again, Mr. Rivera, for joining us today on our show.
And thank you for watching the episode of Media Industries. To see it in other episodes, please visit bronxnet.org.